The story begins with a vast frozen landscape, where a boy named Heyerdahl was exploring with his friends. At that moment, none of them knew what to do, because right in front of them, the ice had broken apart, leaving only freezing water below. On a floating piece of ice lay their toy, and without it, they couldn't play. Someone had to retrieve it. When Heyerdahl looked at his friends, all of them had already stepped back in fear. No one dared to risk it, because if they slipped into the icy water, it could be fatal. But Heyerdahl was different. He was braver than the others and loved exploring. Without hesitation, he jumped onto the small block of ice. Though it wasn't easy, he managed to grab the toy. That moment proved how much braver Heyerdahl was compared to the rest. But sometimes bravery backfires. As he celebrated with the toy, the ice shifted, and Heyerdahl fell into the freezing water. Luckily, his friends pulled him out, or else he would have been gone in seconds. Falling into icy water isn't just about drowning. The temperature is so low that the body quickly loses energy and can't survive for long. For now, Heyerdahl was saved and taken home for treatment. When his father found out, he was furious and gave him a final warning never to attempt such things again. His family even made him promise not to take such risks. Heyerdahl agreed on the surface, but his eyes told a different story. He was destined for adventure, and we would follow his journey using survival skills. Years passed, and Heyerdahl grew up to become a true explorer, someone who traveled to places no one had ever been, studied everything there, and collected information. He even wrote several books based on his research, becoming famous among scholars. At this point, Heyerdahl was on an abandoned island in Polynesia, far removed from the modern world. The people there lived as ancient tribes, following traditional ways of life, and this fascinated him deeply. For months, he stayed among them, studying their culture, exploring with his girlfriend, and making discoveries. Yet, there were still unanswered questions. To find the truth, Heyerdahl spoke with an old tribesman, asking who their ancestors were and where they had originally lived. The elder explained that their ancestors came from the east, from the place where the sun rises. At the farthest edge of that direction lies an island, the island of their gods, where humans were first created and where their ancestors grew up. Over time, those ancestors traveled west, following the path of the sun across the sky, until they finally reached Polynesia, where they settled and multiplied. From the old man's words, it seemed that the true origin of humanity, even the advanced cities filled with modernity, began with those very ancestors. Because those ancestors possessed techniques that would be impossible to recreate today, Heyerdahl and his girlfriend listened intently to every word. It was all new knowledge for them. To prove his point, the old tribesman took Heyerdahl deep into the forest. After hours of walking, they reached a cave where an ancient statue, crafted by their ancestors, still stood. The statue looked incredibly old, and Heyerdahl was shocked. He had only ever heard of such things in stories, but now he was seeing the truth about his lineage with his own eyes. The elder explained that the technologies their ancestors once used were long lost, and that modern humans who think they are highly advanced were, in fact, far behind them. The world believed that Polynesians came from Asia, but the old man insisted that their true ancestors came from America, long before Columbus was ever credited with discovering it. According to him, their ancestors had crossed the ocean and settled on the island, a fact the modern world had never uncovered. Heyerdahl carefully recorded everything to include in his upcoming book, aware that this knowledge could change humanity's global history. For years, he continued exploring the island, gathering vast information until finally presenting it to a publisher. Heyerdahl revealed shocking details. Their ancestors had advanced weapons, and it was not Asians who first brought iron to Polynesia, but early Americans who established tribes there. He urged the publisher to release this information so the world could know the truth. But the publisher was unconvinced, dismissing Heyerdahl's research and even laughing at him, since history widely accepted that Polynesia was reached from Asia, where tribes had boats capable of crossing oceans. At that time, America had no such technology, so how could they have possibly arrived first? Heyerdahl countered that his ancestors had no ships but reached the islands on a simple wooden raft. The publisher laughed even harder, insisting it was impossible, since the island was so remote that even modern ships often sank near it. How could a fragile raft survive? Heyerdahl, however, stood firm. The publisher then challenged him. If he truly believed this, he should prove it himself by attempting the same voyage, from America to Polynesia using nothing but a raft, across thousands of kilometers of dangerous ocean filled with storms and unknown perils. No one dared to go there, but this was Heyerdahl's only chance to prove his discoveries and publish them. Deep inside, he had already decided to accept. He would attempt to travel from America to Polynesia on a raft just as his ancestors once did, even if it sounded like utter madness. Determined, Heyerdahl began seeking funding for his journey, approaching businessmen with his detailed plan of how he would complete the challenge without any modern tools or comforts, using only the same methods his ancestors had used. But after hearing his proposal, most businessmen simply laughed at him. They flatly told him, why would anyone fund a suicide mission? Because attempting such a journey meant inviting death. Every businessman knew, as history claimed, that Polynesia was first discovered by Asians, directly contradicting Heyerdahl's information. If he wanted to prove his theory, he would have to complete the challenge, funding or no funding. His passion, however, drove him forward. It became clear that no investor was willing to support the project, though later they would regret not backing him. For now, Heyerdahl was left deeply discouraged, unable to raise any money despite all his efforts. Frustrated, he ended up at a bar with some friends, looking for people with ocean experience. There, he explained his plan, how he intended to sail from America to Polynesia on a simple raft. If he succeeded, they could all win recognition and rewards from the government. He described himself as an explorer, determined to follow ancient methods by building a raft exactly like his ancestors had used. He even showed them sketches of the raft's design. Everyone looked at it, but none agreed to join. They believed his plan was doomed, certain that such a small raft could never survive the dangerous ocean. One man examined the drawings and immediately pointed out flaws, warning that the ropes binding the raft would come undone halfway across due to the waves, leaving no chance of rescue in the middle of the sea. The plan, he said, was suicidal, with almost no chance of survival. One by one, the men refused to take part. But Heyerdahl didn't break, he decided to keep trying. As he prepared to leave, one man who had been listening carefully approached him. His name was Hem. Just as Heyerdahl was about to walk away, Hem stopped him and said he wanted to join the expedition, showing a photograph of the raft design to prove his sincerity. Surprised, Heyerdahl asked who he was, since Hem clearly had no background in ocean travel. Hem revealed that he was a product engineer, though currently working odd jobs repairing electronics because he couldn't find work in his own field. His education hadn't helped him much in life, and he felt his time had been wasted. But hearing Heyerdahl's mission had inspired him deeply, and without hesitation he volunteered to be part of the team. Heyerdahl, who himself couldn't swim well and lacked deep knowledge of the ocean, was relieved to finally have at least one team member. He knew he would need more companions to make the dangerous journey possible, but another major problem still loomed: funding. No scientists or businessmen were willing to invest in his research, making it the greatest obstacle. At that time, Heyerdahl usually took short breaks to visit his family, but this time he couldn't. He called his wife and told her he needed more time to complete his research and wouldn't be coming home. Furious, she told him to stop this madness, reminding him he had a family and children to think of. His wife told him he needed to take responsibility and care for his family, but Heyerdahl, emotional, insisted that this was his dream. He had spent years on this research, and backing out now would mean all his work had gone to waste. Though reluctant, she understood and gave him permission. Without saying much, Heyerdahl continued on his path. Days passed, and at the harbor, he explained his plan to many, most of whom refused, but a handful agreed. Including Heyerdahl himself, the team now had 5 members, enough to attempt the mission. He carefully explained the plan, and together they brought wood to build the raft. The others were nervous, but Heyerdahl carried an unshakable confidence that a simple wooden raft could survive massive storms. He told them it had to be built exactly in the ancient way, without modern modifications, or else their theory could never be proven. His determination motivated the others, and they began gathering materials to construct the raft as instructed, excited to be part of something unique, unaware of the deadly dangers ahead. The funding problem still remained, until Heyerdahl met a wealthy professor. When Heyerdahl explained his research with passion, the professor, an explorer at heart though too old to venture himself, decided to fund the mission. The team rejoiced, immediately collecting supplies like food and survival tools, though the raft itself would remain exactly as primitive as their ancestors had built it. Soon news of their daring mission spread through newspapers, and people everywhere began following their story, inspired by their courage despite the risks. A photographer even volunteered to join, eager to document the entire journey with his camera. Delighted by the recognition, Heyerdahl welcomed him, making the team's 6 members strong. By now, the whole city, even the government, knew of the mission. To many, it looked like a suicide attempt, but nothing could stop Heyerdahl and his team. After weeks of preparation, the raft was finally ready. On the day of departure, crowds gathered at the harbor, not because they believed the team would succeed, but because they were convinced they would never return. The distance to Polynesia stretched thousands of kilometers, and the ocean promised storms and perils few could imagine. The chances of survival were slim, yet Heyerdahl and his companion said goodbye and set out with hope that, if successful, their names would echo around the world. With only a few days' worth of food, basic supplies, and a small radio for contact, they launched their primitive raft, determined to prove that what they were experiencing was true. Aside from the basics, their raft carried no modern weapons or equipment. It was exactly like the ones their ancestors once used. Soon, a full day passed at sea, and nobody knew what lay ahead. One night, a violent storm struck, shaking their raft so hard that everything scattered around. In the struggle to save the raft, Heyerdahl was thrown overboard and plunged into the water. Unfortunately, he didn't know how to swim and immediately began sinking. Luckily, the others did know, and they managed to grab him and pull him back up. Working calmly together, they survived the storm, which finally passed after a few hours. By morning, the sea was calm again, and they even enjoyed the sight of the still waters. But after just one day in the ocean, their condition was already deteriorating, and they soon noticed that the raft had sustained heavy damage. Repairs were urgent, so Heyerdahl and the others began working quickly. Experts often say that traveling such long distances on a wooden raft is extremely risky. The waves can be massive, and with strong winds driving them, the ropes holding the raft's logs together could loosen and snap. To survive, the crew would need to keep tightening them constantly and should always have extra rope on hand to reinforce the structure. Another crucial element was steering. Large sails were used to catch the wind and control direction. But here, their steering system was failing and no longer working properly. While they were dealing with repairs, a massive whale appeared, circling the raft as if with intent. Most of the crew stayed calm, knowing whales rarely attack humans, but Heyerdahl panicked. Weakened by lack of food and water, he was hallucinating and convinced the whale would destroy them. Driven by fear, he grabbed a sharp weapon and prepared to attack. The others tried to stop him, but Heyerdahl ignored them and hurled the weapon, striking the whale's body. Injured, the whale dove deep into the water, but because the weapon was attached to a rope, it pulled the raft forward violently. If this continued, the raft could be destroyed and sunk. Experts say that in such a situation, the only safe option is to remain still. Whales usually stay deep underwater and surface only to breathe or hunt schools of fish. They don't intend to harm boats, but any sudden movement can draw their attention. Considering their size, even a single strike from a whale could capsize a raft. The safest strategy is to wait quietly until the whale surfaces and swims away, then move only once it's at a safe distance. But Heyerdahl's team was in serious danger. If they didn't cut the rope, they were doomed. Thankfully, they managed to slice it free just in time. Furious at Heyerdahl's reckless act, some crew members lashed out at him, and a heated argument broke out among them. But Heyerdahl calmed everyone down, reminding them they couldn't afford to fight among themselves. As the leader of the mission, he would be the one to decide what came next. Despite the damage to the raft, the group began repairing it again. By now, they had already survived 4 brutal days in the dangerous ocean, but their resources were running out, and so was their hope. At the very least, they should have reached halfway by now, yet there was still no sign of progress. Heyerdahl's mental state was clearly deteriorating, and things got worse when they discovered their only functioning radio signal was now dead. That meant no contact with the outside world. Heyerdahl was the most unstable, hallucinating that the raft was falling apart, convinced the ropes binding the logs were loosening and that their deaths were certain. His panic spread fear among the others. Meanwhile, the cameraman took a small boat away from the raft to film them, everything seeming fine at first, until sharks appeared and began circling his little boat. Just as one was about to attack, Heyerdahl and the others noticed and quickly pulled the cameraman back to safety. Without them, he would have been killed. Now, sharks surrounded the entire area. One crew member, who had a pet parrot, watched in horror as the bird landed on the water and was instantly torn apart by the sharks. Devastated and enraged, he grabbed one of the sharks, hauled it onto the raft, and killed it with a knife. But this was a deadly mistake. Blood spilled into the ocean, drawing an entire frenzy of sharks beneath their raft. Heyerdahl was terrified, rushing to a box filled with steel wires. He suggested reinforcing the raft with them, but Heyerdahl refused, reminding everyone that their mission had to be completed using only ancient methods. He threw the steel wires away, insisting they stick to tradition. While still arguing, Heyerdahl slipped and fell into the ocean. The sharks rushed toward him, but the others managed to pull him back just in time. That near-death experience finally shook Heyerdahl into realizing his constant panic was endangering everyone. He apologized sincerely to the group for his reckless behavior. By now, Heyerdahl and his team had been stranded in the ocean for an entire month, and still there was no sign of the island they were aiming for. Frustration grew, and one crew member suggested they might be going in the wrong direction. He argued they should stop and change course, but Heyerdahl insisted they stay the path, convinced they were heading the right way. Though exhausted and hopeless from dwindling resources, the team reluctantly trusted him. Everyone silently feared death, hoping at least it would come quickly. Despite their doubts, they had chosen this mission against all advice, and now it seemed like everything was lost. But one day, a crew member spotted something on the horizon, a distant island. It could be the very destination they had been searching for. A wave of joy and renewed hope swept through the team. For the first time in weeks, they believed survival was possible. Their radio system suddenly began working again, allowing them to send a message in another language announcing that they were finally nearing the island. The news spread quickly throughout the city, and everyone was stunned because they knew this mission was considered impossible. How could Heyerdahl and his friends possibly reach their destination on just a fragile raft? If they succeeded, it would rewrite history as people knew it. As Heyerdahl and his companions continued their journey, they spotted birds in the sky, an unmistakable sign that land had to be nearby. Following that direction, they finally reached an island, and to their luck, it turned out to be the very one they had been searching for, the Polynesia island. But their greatest challenge still lay ahead. The waves near the shore were ferocious, crashing violently against massive rocks, threatening to destroy the raft and drown them all. They had no choice but to figure out a way through. Hem, the engineer, suggested a plan. Once the wave struck the rocks, they would lose much of their force. If they positioned their raft behind a wave and dropped stones tied with rope into the water to anchor themselves, the wave would break apart against the rocks, giving them a safer chance to push forward. The group agreed, and when a massive wave approached, they put the plan into action, lowering stones with ropes to steady the raft. For a moment, it worked, the raft held in place. But then disaster struck. The rope snapped under the force of the water, and the raging waves carried the raft straight toward the shore. The raft shattered badly, breaking apart in the chaos. Somehow, through sheer luck and determination, the crew managed to swim and crawl onto the shore alive. At last, after months of hardship and uncertainty, they had completed their mission. Joy and triumph lit up their faces. Everyone, including the government, had doubted them, believing the journey was impossible. But the bravery and persistence of these 6 men proved otherwise. This exploration confirmed that Polynesia was not discovered by Asians but by Americans, a revelation that changed history itself. Their names were inscribed in golden letters, forever remembered. And it's important to note, this story is based on real events. These 6 men truly endured this extraordinary journey, and the raft they built was entirely real. That's where our story ends.